If a nuclear weapon is ever used in a modern war, the world won't just be watching another military strike. It would trigger a sequence of events that extends far beyond the battlefield, affecting human life, global economies, and political stability across the entire world. And to understand the real impact, you have to look at what happens step by step after such an event. The first consequence is immediate and absolute destruction in the impact zone. A nuclear explosion is fundamentally different from conventional weapons. It releases an enormous amount of energy in a fraction of a second. The temperature at the center of the blast becomes so extreme that structures, vehicles, and even materials can be destroyed almost instantly. Entire urban areas within range can be severely damaged or completely erased in moments. But what makes it even more severe is that the destruction is only the beginning. The second consequence is radiation exposure. Unlike physical damage, radiation is invisible, silent, and persistent. It doesn't stop when the explosion ends. It continues to affect the environment and living organisms long after the initial event. Radiation damages cells at a microscopic level, which is why its effects can appear immediately or develop over time. This is what makes nuclear events fundamentally different from any other type of disaster. The danger doesn't end when the explosion is over. And because of that, the affected area can remain hazardous for extended periods depending on the level of contamination. The third consequence is the collapse of local emergency response systems. In a normal disaster, hospitals, rescue teams, and infrastructure work together to manage the crisis. But in a nuclear event, the scale of damage is so extreme that these systems become overwhelmed almost instantly. Medical facilities would face an overwhelming number of casualties at the same time, while also dealing with resource shortages and environmental risks. Emergency response becomes extremely limited, not because of lack of effort, but because of physical and structural limitations. This creates a rapid humanitarian crisis that spreads far beyond the initial impact zone. But the effects do not remain local. The fourth consequence is global economic disruption. Modern economies are deeply interconnected. A major nuclear event would immediately create global uncertainty. Financial markets react strongly to instability, and confidence in global systems can drop within hours. Energy markets, trade routes, and supply chains would all be affected. Even countries not directly involved in the conflict would experience economic consequences due to global interdependence. Prices can become unstable, trade can slow down, and markets may enter periods of extreme volatility. And finally, the fifth and most critical consequence is escalation risk. The use of a nuclear weapon in any modern conflict does not remain isolated. It creates intense political and military pressure globally. Other major powers would be forced to respond, reassess, and potentially intervene in some form. This is where the situation becomes extremely dangerous, because the initial event is no longer the only concern. The reaction to it becomes just as significant. Escalation can happen quickly, especially in a world where multiple nations have nuclear capabilities and strategic alliances. And that is the core danger. Not only the weapon itself, but the chain reaction it triggers afterward. Because once that threshold is crossed, the world enters a phase where uncertainty becomes global, not local. In the end, nuclear weapons are not just military tools. They represent a level of power that can reshape global systems instantly. And that is why even the possibility of their use remains one of the most critical and sensitive issues in modern geopolitics.